The skills and techniques required to plan, prepare, perform any collaborative conversation, from a one-on-one interview up to a full-blown workshop, differ immensely. Now, most people are comfortable conducting a personal interview or participating in a small user story conversation. At that level, collaboration is relatively simple if some of the parties are skilled in communication. And whether you lead or contribute, you need to be prepared. If you need information from someone, you should know what information you want, how you're going to get it, how you're going to capture it, and what you're going to do in case your plan fails. I actually recommend sharing your plan with the other party so they can prepare as well. Because if you're the one providing the information, you have to prepare yourself by understanding the objective of the gathering, consider how you're going to contribute, collect examples so that you can get your points across, and be open to following the lead of the person interviewing you. For small group gatherings, like 3 to 6 participants, each member needs sufficient facilitation skills to achieve his or her desired outcome. Even at this level, someone in the group needs to take care of preparing and monitoring the meeting. For the person leading a workshop, their primary mission is to achieve the goals of the session, despite what happens before, during, or after the session. The more people involved in a gathering, the greater the likelihood of unplanned incidents. To facilitate a workshop, you need tools, techniques, and skills to ensure that the group forms, storms, norms, and performs, maintain a synergistic environment, encourage everyone's participation, deliver the expected workshop outcome on time and at the appropriate level of detail, and enthuse everyone with the process and the results. Now, no matter how many attendees, the essence of collaborative meetings is that each participant gets what they need. Everyone has an innate set of soft skills. They're your personality traits and behaviors. You acquire them by living in a society. These attributes are essential to effective collaboration. Short form, they're how well you play with others. And initially, they're determined by your environment and your temperament. Changing behavioral traits requires a desire and a commitment to change, constant vigilance, and the willingness to adapt your natural personality traits and behaviors to better deal with other people. Commonly referenced people skills for the ITBA include things like communication and collaboration skills, people focus, curiosity, being generally interested in what the other person's perspective is, empathy, nonverbal communication, like body language, being a team player, and there are others. Effective communication is critical for collaboration, and it's bidirectional. You need to express yourself well and adapt your message to the respective audience. But as the party who wants information from the other party, you need to phrase your questions in terms that they can understand. You also need to be able to understand the intent behind what they say. So I recommend you start a conversation with open-ended questions to get expansive kind of answers, and use closed-ended questions to confirm your understanding of what they said. The desire to work in a team is a fundamental requirement for collaboration. That implies team members form and foster relationships, find common ground, and build consensus around ideas. But it also implies allowance for renegade team members, those who are critical of new ideas and like to focus on the risk of the change. The power of teamwork lies not in conformity, but in the diversity of ideas and the synergy of the group. Studies prove that diverse groups are more productive than homogeneous ones. Our ability to work in teams is based on our social skills. A lot of people actually maintain that it is this set of abilities that defines humanity. To participate in collaborative conversations, all of the team members profit from social skills to support each other, to become a valuable member of the team, to participate actively in problem solving, to stimulate attendee creativity in whatever way, enhance their understanding of the goals and objectives, make sure they listen to each other for intent, and solicit contributions from each participant. To be absolutely clear, collaboration is a team effort. The distributions within the team is relatively irrelevant. What's important is that each participant applies social skills as appropriate. A collaborative conversation is one person leading the conversation with the support of the other participants. The leading and contributing roles can switch between participants in a heartbeat. That's one of the tenets of a self-organizing team, which is one of the staples of the Agile philosophy and critical for any collaborative conversation. Working in such an environment relies heavily on social skills. Some people are natural collaborative conversationalists. Other people, like me, can achieve similar results by increasing our understanding of basic human communication. Since I was a software engineer in my early years, I had to become a human being before I was able to collaborate with colleagues. Only after acclimating was I qualified to facilitate workshops. Facilitation is a critical social skill for achieving collaboration. It's the art of leading a group of contributors over whom you have absolutely no authority to deliver a predefined outcome. There are a lot of different facilitation styles, and each one of those can succeed in the right environment and fail miserably in a hostile environment. Facilitators also need techniques or hard skills. You learn these by taking courses, reading books, watching videos, trial and error, or just following a procedure. Examples of hard skills that contribute to collaborative conversations for the ITBA include things like agenda planning and invitations, organizing information, process design, meeting rules of engagement, time management skills, obviously business analysis skills and requirements analysis skills, writing, analyzing, validating, and working with things like user stories, features, functions, and acceptance criteria. Of course, there are a thundering herd of other techniques, but let me just go into depth on a couple that I enjoy. Personally, I love Armageddon storming for situations in which the group is trying to resolve a particularly challenging problem and is having difficulty finding solutions. If the organization has tried different solutions to address a problem, but it keeps happening, try this. First, give the group a limited amount of time, typically 3 to 5 minutes, to imagine how to make the current situation worse than it already is. You want them to exaggerate the impact the problem has. Turn the problem into a major catastrophe. Second, discuss each scenario to determine, is this scenario realistic enough to spend time on? And if so, what could be done to prevent it, to recover if it does happen, or pivot if you can't recover? You can generate a ton of user stories, features, or requirements that eliminate or at least alleviate the problem. This technique lets people look at the glass half empty side of an issue, which allows them to appreciate any solution a whole lot more. It also makes them aware of the risks of not solving the problem. Another one, affinity mapping, starts with a decent-sized collection of diverse items like user stories, requirements, features, problem solutions, test scenarios, anything like that. Now, the simplest implementation of affinity mapping is to have each item on a Post-it note or an index card. And you also need some place where you can post this stuff visibly. Pick any item and place it somewhere within your display area. If the selected item is central to your main topic, place it towards the middle of the space. If it's more of a peripheral topic, place it more towards the edge of the space. And place each of the remaining items close to the already posted related items. If they're unrelated, post them farther away to form a new group. Now, the placement is actually a visual representation of the affinity between items. I'll repeat this process until you've placed all of the items you've collected somewhere on the display space. Then work with the group to assign a name to each set of items and discuss relationships between the different sets. There are a thundering herd of well-known techniques that use this simple gimmick. story mapping, user journey maps, feature maps, even Kanban boards are based on affinity mapping. Visualization of the grouped items generates insights that individual items hide. Finally, you can use any prioritization technique to focus on the most pressing items on your list. Brainstorming can generate an abundance of ideas related to any topic whatsoever. Effective brainstorming is time-boxed. It's focused on a defined objective, and it's really invigorating. Every contribution generates additional contributions. When a group's in a zone, the number of ideas they can generate is mind-boggling. Given all of that, brainstorming is not for everyone. Studies show that people who fear public speaking, which is the majority, they fear it more than death. A lot of people will only mention an idea when they feel safe, and that kind of limits their contributions in an active brainstorming session. Secondly, in a fast-paced brainstorming session, a lot of people are overwhelmed and just distracted by the sheer volume of ideas being introduced. They don't have time to form original thoughts. Silent brainstorming, aka brainwriting or silent ideation, to the rescue. No one speaks. Everyone jots their ideas on post-it notes, index cards, or slips of paper. And then they toss that idea on a pile in the middle of the group and then try to think of a new idea. If they come up blank, they can pick an item from the pile, typically from someone else, to see if it triggers any additional ideas. Idea storming generates a thundering herd of ideas that need to be evaluated. Once the new contributions become sporadic, you stop the exercise and maybe use affinity mapping to organize the results into groups and subgroups. Those are 3 techniques that I've used many times to lead collaborative conversations. You're going to find a ton of other techniques online from other facilitators and authors. The presented lists of soft and technical skills that I have introduced are inherently incomplete. For each skill I mentioned, you need to consider, do you really need it? Why do you need it? When do you need it? And to what degree will it impact the various forms of collaborative conversations you are leading? You can never have too many techniques in your toolkit. As Einstein stated, the more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know. During our user story and requirements workshops, we've experienced distractions over the years like the hotel catching fire a few stories below our meeting room, a cheerleader convention in line of sight of the participants right outside our windows, the roof of the building being tarred over our heads, earthquakes, hurricanes, and a lot of others. You need a detailed plan for dealing with environmental distractions. However, most distractions do not come from the environment. They come from people's actions. So here's a small sampling of the typical types of distractions you might face while hosting a get-together of any kind. People using their phones or just multitasking throughout the meeting. People constantly leaving and returning, interrupting whoever's talking. Contributors engaging in side conversations. One or more contributors dominating the discussion. Just generally people acting without considering how it affects the others. These behaviors actually indicate failure on part of the leader or facilitator of the conversations, and they're signals that you need to use as feedback. If you observe them, it's time to change tactics. I actually have a default strategy for dealing with any of these distractions. If it's a one-time occurrence or a minor distraction, I ignore it. I'll use humor to acknowledge and diffuse the situation without embarrassing the person that caused it. I'll also call out repeat offenders in a private conversation during a break. For severe situations, I might call an unscheduled break, privately make the offender aware of the consequences of their behavior, and then after that, when we reconvene, I'm going to review the meeting rules again. In extreme situations, and after repeated attempts at managing it, I consider asking the offender to leave the meeting, or if drastic measures are needed, and I have done this, cancel the meeting and consider rescheduling once the situation's been addressed. Having facilitated hundreds of workshops around the globe, I can honestly say I only reached level 5 in 2 instances. It was truly a last resort. The point is, you cannot plan for every potential distraction. Effective leaders of collaborative conversations develop fallback techniques for reinvigorating a group after any distraction. My advice: plan for the unexpected. Unfortunately, anytime you engage in a collaborative conversation, there is the potential for conflict. Conflict resolution is actually a four-step process. Identification acknowledges that the conflict exists. Then you need analysis to determine whether the conflict is caused by alternate realities, competing perspectives, competing beliefs, personal issues, or levels of authority. Resolution adopts a strategy then, based upon your analysis, that is best suited to the situation. Finally, documentation captures the situation and the resolution for proof and, to offer opportunities for growth. There's a well-known method called the Thomas-Kilmann Conflict Mode Instrument, or TKI. It defines 5 conflict resolution strategies based on the assumption that people generally choose how to balance cooperation versus assertiveness in a conflict. The 5 strategies are avoiding, competing, accommodating, collaborating, and compromising. Now, each of these strategies has its own pros and cons. Here are a couple more facilitation tips for dealing with conflict. Invite debate around ideas, but manage the conversation to avoid personal confrontations. Point to the meeting ground rules that encourage discussions and forbid personal attacks. Make sure you have that on your ground rules, by the way. Make sure that each attendee has an opportunity to express a thought or an opinion. Use subtle body language and transition statements to diffuse outbursts. Get a sense of where attendees are without pressuring them to reach a premature conclusion. If you have to, intervene assertively to provide direction. That's especially true if participants are talking over each other or the discussion threatens to get heated. Above all, be an honest broker of the conversation. Stay impartial at all times.